Can you imagine your life where money is your friend, working with you to achieve all your dreams and desires? If you struggle seeing money as your friend, then join Kathy Cook Noble, financial advisor and educator on understanding how your money can work for you. It is possible. Now, here is Financially Speaking with Kathy Cook Noble.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Ashlee Quinn-Hogan and I'm the host of tonight's episode. So on this episode of Financially Speaking, we're going to talk a little bit about financial planning, financial goals, and what I like to call programming your GPS. So, almost everything in our world today anyways is instant gratification, which means I get it when I want it. And we think that, everything should be instantaneous. Everything should be, handed to us right here, right now. Everything we work for, we should receive immediate rewards for. And we've been socialized to believe that, everything good that happens to us happens right away, which is just totally not the case. And, the most important things in life are not immediate. They take time, they take effort. And, it's things that we work little by little over time to accumulate. And, you might be asking yourself, what does any of this have to do with financial, topics? And what does this have to do with finance and investing and money? And it has everything to do with it. This is the direction we're going. And, the ultimate message is that, growing wealth takes time. And, it can be like a hindrance to you, or it can seem like it's, demotivating to invest money and not have that instant gratification that you want so badly. But the thing to remember about, setting financial goals and all of that is that it's gratification that, comes later on. And so that's the main topic that we're going to be talking about today is setting your GPS to, a destination that gets you where you need to be. And so I guess the main thing I like to think about with young people and everyone in general is, if you have a destination set, you know how long it takes to get there. So why not start now? Pushing it further and further along, it's still going to take just as long to get there. You're just prolonging, the journey. And there's a special quote by Tony Robbins that I like, and it's people underestimate what they can do in a decade, but they overestimate what they can do in a year. And so that ties into this instant gratification is like we think that everything we do now we should be rewarded for right away, but we underestimate that if we start something now that we might not receive reward for right away. We underestimate what the effects of that are going to be long term. And with finance, that's a huge part is, investing a little bit of money every month or every year, every week, or whatever your preference is. It can seem like it's something that, is just taking away from your enjoyment of the present. But we underestimate how much that can really impact our futures. And I think that's an important point to highlight today. But, also, in the rest of your life too. And, a question to consider for our listeners out there is, do you have the patience to get where you're going, even when the results you're getting, are not immediately gratifying? And that's, something to take into consideration. If you're not receiving that instant feedback, that instant approval from whatever you're doing, whether it be financial or not, do you have, the patience to continue to do that thing, knowing that it's going to pay off long term? And so with programming your GPS, what I mean by that is, what is your destination? What is the goal that you're trying to achieve when it comes to investing? And it's such an important topic because, consider it this way. If you're going from point A to point B, you're inputting point B into your GPS, and it gives you a step-by-step instruction on how you're going to get from point A to point B. But, imagine getting into your car with your friend, let's say, and you're asking them, where are we going? What's our point B? And, they come up with, well, you know what? I don't know. I thought I would just start driving that way and see where we end up. And although that might sound like a fun thing to do, but how likely is it that you guys are going to end up where you're supposed to be? It's probably not very likely, right? Well, it's the same thing. And that's what I mean by programming your GPS is you can't just hop into, a quote unquote car and expect to end up in the financial position or achieve those financial goals that you want if you're not even inputting a destination in there. You're the pilot, you're in control. You have to be the one to decide what that destination is, and what that ultimate goal is going to be at the end of the day. And so when it comes to programming your GPS, it's you're talking about what is this end goal? What is this end destination I want to get to? Do you want to end college debt free? Do you want to have a down payment ready for when you finish college and you enter the workforce? Are you saving for a trip? Are you saving for retirement? Are you saving for kids, marriage, saving for a car? What is it that you want to do with your money? And that's the ultimate question. And that's the question that you have to ask yourself. And I mean, there's probably a lot of things that you would love to do with your money, but it's really honing in on that 1, 2, or 3 things that are a priority for you. It's a reflection of where you want to end up and how you want to get there, because at the end of the day, you can't just follow a number of random steps and expect to end up at a destination. You have to outline what the destination is first, and and then the steps make logical sense to progress to that destination. So that's what we're going to talk about today is how can you program your GPS to reflect your financial goals, and what are these steps? What are the steps that we need to reach our destination? What do these financial goals look like? How are they different for other people? How do we set financial goals? What are the steps to setting those? And those are all important topics we're going to discuss, but it all starts with choosing that destination, choosing what it is you want to do with your money, or your wealth or your investments, or whatever it is. It all starts with choosing, making up your mind and sticking to it. So that's where the steps fall into place. So, I'm talking about these steps that, get you from point A to point B. So they get you from where you are now to where you need to be in the future, or where you want to be, or where you're meant to be in the future. And these steps are, there are daily financial habits, the directions we take, now, the directions we start now, the ones that we've been taking in the past. Maybe we haven't been taking the right steps in the past. Maybe point B is, north, and we've been, going south. And that's okay. That's part of life. That's growing. That's what life is. But it's about recognizing where you stand now and what are the, appropriate steps that need to be taken to get to the destination that you want to be at. And so those come from financial habits and setting goals. And goals are a really important thing in all aspects of our life. It doesn't just, they're not just financial goals, life goals, career goals, educational goals. Setting goals is a big part of life, and following those goals, and in really ingraining those habits into us, good financial habits. It's something that's hard to come by, but once you establish them, that journey from point A to point B, the journey from where you are now to where you're supposed to be, becomes so much easier. And I know for me anyway, some of those financial habits that, you had when you were younger, you had as a young adult, they start to change as you grow and you mature and you learn. And that's part of the process too, is you can't expect to be perfect right away with any of your financial goals or habits. But if you start now, you can, perfect that over time. And that's the most important part about this is realizing that it's not about, being perfect right away. It's, starting now. And I've said this in all my episodes is, the time is now. The time's now to start. Because if anything, you have time on your side, and it's better to start sooner rather than later. And, with financial goals, starting now and laying out these financial habits and setting these goals for yourself, is going to get you not only to your destination quicker, but it's going to be more efficient and be a more efficient way to get there. And so part of this is, you got to take control of your personal finances and begin to think about, what really matters to you, right? So your goals, not everyone's going to have the same financial goal. It's going to differ based on, your age, your living situation, and just who you are in general, and what your goals are. And maybe, what's important to you right now will change in a year or two, and that's fine too. But for instance, for me, a big goal of mine is to be able to, graduate university debt free. And so my goals are reflective of that, and how I can save money to end up debt free at the end of this. But maybe your goal is to save up for a trip, or to save up for a down payment for a house, or maybe you're planning a wedding, maybe you're planning a big vacation, whatever it is. Your financial goals are going to be sort of fine-tuned to that destination. And that's another point, is that it doesn't matter necessarily what the destination is. It could be point B, it could be point C, D, whatever the point is. It's the steps you take to get there that are important, in figuring out what those points are for you, because we're all starting off at different points too. We're not all necessarily starting off at point A. And so each of our steps to get there are going to be a little bit different. But one of the points is if you aren't working towards anything specific, if you don't know what your destination is, you're likely not taking the most efficient route to get there. If you're at point X and you're trying to get to point Y, in order to get there the most efficiently and the most the quickest way, you gotta know sort of what the path is. If you don't know, if you're at point X and you don't know what point you're going to, you're probably spending more time getting there than you should. And what that, equates to financially is you're probably spending more money than you should. So, or you're not saving as efficiently as you should. And that's what comes with programming this GPS, is finding out how can I be the most efficient with my money, but how can I also be the most successful with the money that I do have. And there's tons of ways of going about this, and it all boils down to, we'll talk about it in a bit, but it all boils down to setting these goals that are going to make you successful, and what these financial goals look like, what they are, how they're different. It all really depends on who you are as a person, what point you're trying to get to, where you are now financially. I mean, some people have a ton of experience investing and saving and bringing in money, and a lot of us have no experience. And no matter where you sit, it's okay. It's, you can still set financial goals. There's still lots of room for mistakes, and that's why I always say it's a good thing to start now. Start sooner rather than later, because with time on your side, you have time to make mistakes and learn and have these experiences, and all of those sorts of things that make life that applies in the financial world as well. But when you get going with your destination, once you program your GPS and you have the steps laid out for you, it becomes super, super easy to to follow those steps and to get to the destination that you want to go to. But it's time for our first break of the show. So I'm going to leave you with that thought there. When we return, we'll talk more about financial goals, how you can select financial goals that work better for you, and how to set those goals in a realistic and achievable way. You're listening to Financially Speaking with myself, Ashlee Quinn-Hogan, on the Inspired Choices Network. When we return, we'll continue to look at financial goals and how to set those for yourself.
Too many of us get caught up in the unreal lives of reality television and complete to acquire stuff, which is setting us up to accumulate lots of debt. We're scared, confused, and don't know who to talk to. By tuning into Financially Speaking radio show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook Noble, you'll learn tips you can use to improve your financial health, which in turn can improve your overall health and make for a very happy life. Live a life you can afford and enjoy. It is possible. Listen for Financially Speaking radio show every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. This is the Financially Speaking Show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook-Noble. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email by sending to Kathy@bookkeepplus.ca. Now back to the program.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan on Financially Speaking, and today we've been talking about programming your GPS and what that looks like and how you can reach those financial goals, how to set financial goals, and how these financial goals differ for everybody. And before we went on break, we were looking at what are these financial goals, and I said we're going to discuss how these are different and what they look like. So financial goals are their savings, their investments, or even spending targets that we hope to achieve over some period of time, and it's usually dependent upon the stage of life that you're in, and the goals that you want to achieve, and what that kind of involves is making choices about what's a priority for you now, but what's likely to also be a priority for you later on. And since you do have to make these choices about where you are right now in life, whether the most important thing is your education, whether it's your career, whether it's a home, whether it's a trip or a car or whatever the case is, it's important to first really think about what matters to you, and where your priorities are, and what things in life you're willing to sacrifice in order to reach your goals, because one thing is there's so much in our lives that we want. There's so many goals that we have. We have short term, we have long term, we have instant goals that we want right now, and we have to sacrifice some in order to appease others, and it's not that we have to sacrifice them altogether. It's just that there's some that we're going to prioritize over others. And so I'll give you an example for me personally. Obviously I have goals about owning a home, having the nice car, eventually one day getting married, and those are all huge investments, and those are all goals that I would consider more long-term goals. But for me right now, more short-term goals is my education, is making sure that when I leave university, when the time comes for me to leave, that I have that money set aside, that I can pay off those loans, and that the investment I'm making in myself pays off, that it doesn't hinder me down the road. So for a lot of young people that are in my situation, that are students or that are thinking about university or that have just graduated university, a lot of us would have that same short-term, possibly long-term goal to minimize the investment that we have, that we accumulate, because school is expensive, and we not all of us have the ability to just pay for that all ahead of time. A lot of us do have to take out loans. So like here in Canada, in Ontario anyway, we have OSAP, which gives you loans. I know there's a lot of students that get bank loans or grants or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, there is a large proportion of students who go to university. They do have some form of student debt that they have to pay off. And starting to set your financial goals when you start university or when you're in the middle of university, as opposed to at the end of university, can maybe be the difference between you paying your student loans off within a few years or paying your student loans off for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And at the end of the day, it's up to you, right? It's a priority on what's important to you and what matters to you. And so that's where this sacrifice comes in. Is it more important for you to have a new car this year, or is it more important for you to, keep the car that you've been driving that, maybe isn't as fancy as some of your friends, but it gets you where you need to go. But at the end of 5 years, your loans are going to be paid off versus at the end of 10 years. And so with this sacrifice, it comes money management. It comes with knowing, what your financial situation is, because it's unrealistic to say that, you can set goals without knowing, sort of what your financial situation is. And this ties into what we talked about a few weeks ago on the podcast about budgeting. And I know that there's that word again that everyone tries to run from, but it keeps coming up because, it's a super important topic. And it's just simply the best way to understand your financial situation. And that's what it boils down to, is, how can you know the balance? Like, how can you balance the money that's coming in versus the money that's going out? And for me, the easiest, the most efficient, the most accurate way of doing that is budgeting. And that's sort of, that's why that was my first episode, is because that's sort of the basis for everything that I'm going to talk about, is knowing your financial situation. And the best way to do that is through a budget. And I know last time on the show, we talked about the way I like to budget, which is through Excel. But, there are so many ways you can budget now with iPhone apps or smartphone apps, a ton of different ways on laptop computers and things like that. Pen and paper, if you're super old school, no shame there, right? It boils down to what works for you. But, I'll say it every single time, don't be scared of budgeting, because that is going to be the baseline for everything, that you do. And so you kind of, you can balance the money that comes into you, but also that goes out. And you can analyze how, your income and your expenses sort of either match up, hopefully, or they don't, which is, it's better to know than not to know, so that you can see where your money is going. But more importantly, make adjustments to that, to help you, improve, where you're going, improve the steps that you need to get to your destination. And for me, budgeting is the best way to avoid debt, because a lot of us, we make mental notes of how much we spend, but there's absolutely no way that we can keep track of that over the span of, a week, let alone a month. So once you write it down and you see it all at the end of the month, and you're like, oh my goodness, I spent, $200 on bagels last month. There's an area that can be adjusted. And, if you wouldn't have written that down, if you wouldn't have budgeted, then how would you know that? So that's always the basis for me, is before you set any financial goals, before you get to program your GPS, before you get to figure out what steps you have to know where you are. Because it's fair enough to, know where you want to be, but if you don't know where you are, how are you going to get there? And that's where the budget comes in, is setting the groundwork for where you are financially in your situation. And, there's three major steps. I'm going to summarize the last episode I did on budgeting. There's three major steps to budgeting. So listing all your sources of income would be the first. I like to do it on a monthly basis, but that's just me. Feel free to do it on a weekly. I wouldn't recommend doing it yearly. That's a bit of a stretch, but whatever floats your boat. List all your sources of income on a monthly basis is the first step. Second one is list all your expenses on a monthly basis as well, and then just make adjustments to make sure that money's not going out faster than it's coming in, or making sure that money's not going out in greater amounts than it's coming in, because that's what we want to know, right? And if the first couple months is you adjusting, that's totally fine, right? There's nothing wrong with having more being spent than is coming in, as long as you're aware of it and you're making those adjustments to stop it. If you don't know, then you can't expect yourself to change it. It's one of those things that just is not possible. So that's the first step in all of this is budgeting. and figuring out what your financial situation is, how the money coming in, relates to the money going out, and how you can adjust it. And the adjustment is also a tricky part because for a lot of us, like for students anyway, it's pretty set in stone what we have coming in, and what we have going out is the part that we can change. But what we have going in is, as a student, it's pretty standard. So maybe you have a scholarship from school, maybe you have a part-time job, maybe you have OSAP, maybe you have savings from the summer, maybe your parents help you out. Whatever it is, you got to make sure that what your income is more than what you're spending, or else you're just spending money every month. And so you're spending money every year, and you're not really saving anything to pay for student loans at the end of your academic career. So it's really important to look at your expenditures and figure out, how can I minimize those, or how can I make sure that I'm spending money on things that are actually important to spend money on. And so once you have figured out, where you stand financially, whether it takes a month, 2, 3, 4, whatever it takes, however many months it takes, once you figure out, your spending habits and how you can alter those a little bit if need be. If not, and you're already doing a great job, then so be it. But if you need to make those adjustments, then make them. There's no shame in that. Make the adjustments so that you know where you stand financially, and that you can make the plan to get to where you need to be financially. And so I guess the next step would be, once you figure out where you are, is to set these goals, these steps to get you where you need to be. And when it comes to setting financial goals, it's like setting goals in any other aspect of your life, right? There's a certain formula that works well when it comes to setting these goals. And then the first thing I like to make sure when I'm setting these financial goals is, what is my overall priority? So what is my priority now, and what is my priority 5 years from now and 10 years from now? And so that helps me sort of lay out the groundwork for, what goal is going to come first. Because we all, if you're anything like me, and you're ambitious, and you have a lot of wants, and you have a lot of desires, then you have numerous goals floating around in your head, 24/7. And that's great. That's wonderful. But you sort of have to have a way of prioritizing. And it might not be what matters the most to you, but it's what matters the most to you in this moment. So what goals, absolutely cannot wait. They have to happen this year or within the next couple of years. And then which goals, you have a little bit of time. You have maybe 5 or 6 years to fine tune things. And then what goals are, something that you want eventually, but it's not super essential that you have them today or tomorrow. It's something that can be more long-term. So maybe, 9, 10, 11 years down the road. So, sit down and figure out what, is most important to you within the next 1 to 2 years, what's most important for you within the next 5 to 6, and what's most important for the next maybe 10 to 12 years. And then start, setting some goals for those time periods. So, what I like to do is follow sort of, I know we've all heard this before, like the SMART goal. So something that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. And I know it's really like cheesy to say, but it's cheesy because it works. That's just the way it is. But like, so for example, like specifics, you want to set a goal that's specific. So you wouldn't say, for a short-term goal that I want more money. That's a start. That's awesome. I'm sure most of us would have that as a goal in our back pocket if we had the opportunity to. But, how can you be more specific with that goal? Well, I want to make, an extra $2,000 a year. Awesome. That's a good start. You can get more specific. You can make that more measurable. You can make that more achievable. But the first step is just to set a goal that is specific. And so, that's your baseline, is make a goal, make it specific. But we'll get more into that when we come back, because it is time for a second break. You're listening to the Financially Speaking podcast on the Inspired Choices Network. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan, and we'll be right back after this break.
Too many of us get caught up in the unreal lives of reality television and complete to acquire stuff, which is setting us up to accumulate lots of debt. We're scared, confused, and don't know who to talk to. By tuning into Financially Speaking radio show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook Noble, you'll learn tips you can use to improve your financial health, which in turn can improve your overall health and make for a very happy life. Live a life you can afford and enjoy. It is possible. Listen for Financially Speaking radio show every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Money is complicated, right? Actually, no, it's not. You don't have to be a trader on Wall Street to get a handle on your money. TV shows often instill fear to keep you believing you can't understand it or do anything yourself. If dealing with your finances brings up a lot of other F words, then you need to read All Ladies Should Use the F Word, A Guide to Loving Your Finances by Kathy Cook Noble. Kathy helps you take control of your finances and leave the other F word, fear, in the dust.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is the Financially Speaking Show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook Noble. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email by sending to Kathy@bookkeepplus.ca. Now back to the program.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan, and you're listening to Financially Speaking on the Inspired Choices Network. Before we went into our break, we were talking about SMART goals, and specifically SMART financial goals, and how to set those and what those look like. And so before we went on break, I talked about the first sort of component of those goals, which is to set something up that's specific. So it's not just, enough to say, I want to be better with my money, or I want to, make more money, or I want to have more money, or I want to have more savings or more equity, or whatever the case is. You got to be more specific than that. It's like we're talking about programming your GPS. It's like saying that, you live in Ontario and you want to get to Alberta, and that's great, but where in Alberta? Because it's going to depend. It's going to, where you go is going to depend on what your goals are. And so you got to be more specific than that. If you just punch, a province or a state for anyone who's from the United States in there, it's not super specific. You got to, get a little bit more specific. So you got to get a city, maybe, a specific house in that city, or whatever the case is, as specific as possible. So, a good goal for, to be specific, and I'm going to talk about student debt because that's something that applies to many young people and a lot of us as students, is, maybe our goal is I want to pay off my student debt in 5 years. Seems like a reasonable goal. So that's something that's specific, and it's something that, we can sort of solidify in our minds. And so the next sort of step would be to make sure, okay, this is my goal, is to pay off my student debt in 5 years. Is it measurable? Is there some way for me to measure this or to track my progress in this goal? And so for, I want to pay off my student debt in 5 years. We have that yearly part, but, okay, well, how much do we want to pay per year? Right. So maybe I need to pay $600 a month toward my balance. Maybe that's the goal, is to, have $600 every month set aside, to pay off my student debt, and to make sure that at the end of the month, I have that amount to pay so that I can hit my goal of paying off my student debt within the next 5 years. And that measurement piece can be a lot of different things, right? It could be money. So like how much money, it can be time, like how much time. It can be a number of different things, but as long as you have some unit of measurement, then you have a good goal on your hands. It's not just saying, I want to pay off my student debt every month, because sure, that's great. But, technically speaking, if you were to pay $1 of your student debt, for the month of September, then you're still kind of, hitting that goal, but it's probably, you're probably not challenging yourself enough to be where you want to be at the end of the 5 years. So we have specific, we have measurable. The next one is a big one. It's achievable. And, what kind of comes into play here is how are you going to achieve it? How is it possible? How are you going to work towards it? So it's great to be able to set a goal that's specific and measurable by saying I'm going to pay, $2,000 every month off my student debt. But is that necessarily, is it an achievable goal? Is that something that, you have within your means to do? And for a lot of us as students, absolutely not. That's not something that we have in our means to do. And a lot of us they're adults, we don't have that in our means to do either. So you got to make sure you're setting goals that, you can achieve, because at the end of the day, that's the main part, right? You can set all the goals in the world that you want to set. But if you're never going to achieve them, then what's the point? So that's where achievement comes in. And for students, like I said earlier, our income is pretty, for most of us anyway, this is not always the case, but our income's pretty either limited or it's set. It doesn't do a lot of fluctuating. So sort of where we can, make changes or, switch things up is in our expenses and, kind of figuring out, well, what am I going to spend less on to achieve this goal? If $600 a month isn't just going to fall out of the sky for me to pay off my student debt, where is that going to come from? Maybe it's, saving $100 a month on a phone bill that's, a little bit more than you need right now. Maybe it's saving $100 on, coffees that, when you could just make coffee at home every day. I know it's a scary thing to think, but, it's just as easy to make a coffee at home. It takes you an extra maybe 5 minutes. Honestly, you're probably saving time if you're going to the drive-thru anyway, because those can take forever. But it's finding those areas where maybe you're spending a little bit more than you should be, and figuring out, how can I take money from there and, sort of reuse it somewhere else so that I can achieve my goals. And that's where, the achievability component comes in, is you got to be willing to, if you're going to set a goal, you got to be willing to work towards it. It doesn't just happen because you write it down. You got to be willing to reassess and reevaluate your life and your situations to see, how can I make this actually work? And so we have the first half of the SMART goal. So you got specific, measurable, achievable. The next sort of component is realistic. And that's a big one too, for a lot of us. I was going to say just for students, but it's not absolutely just for students. It's for anyone in all walks of life, whether you're older, whether you're retired, whether you're a parent, teenager, whatever the case is if your goals aren't realistic, it's demotivating to set those types of goals for yourself, and you're probably not going to achieve them regardless. And when I say realistic, it's, in the realm of finance, it's based on your lifestyle and your financial situation. And there's, that component again, and, financial situation, you guys probably know I'm going to say it. It comes back to, being self-aware and budgeting and knowing sort of what your point A is, and what your lifestyle is, because it's easy to say, well, I'm a minimalist, or, I recognize that I spend a lot, on coffee or whatever the case is, but, you got to assess all aspects of your life and, everything that you spend money on, because a lot of the time, you may not even realize that you're spending, ridiculous amounts of money on things that, you don't necessarily need to be spending money on. I pick on coffee a lot because I think that's one that we can all relate to. You never drive by a Tim Hortons, or, well, for those of us in Canada, Tim Hortons, but maybe in the States, it's a Starbucks or, whatever the equivalent is to Tim Hortons over there, Dunkin' Donuts, maybe, don't quote me on that. Don't come for me either. But maybe you're spending more on coffee, but you never drive by those places and see it empty, right? There's always people there. And it's, $2, $1, whatever it is to get your caffeine fix for the day. But, some of us go there twice a day. Some of us go there 3 times, and even over the span of a week, that adds up, right? And so maybe reassessing and saying, well, is it realistic for me to go from, 3 coffees a day down to 1 coffee a week? I mean, if you have that willpower, then, you're the most impressive person in the world to me. But, it's more realistic to say, maybe I'm spending, going to, Tim Hortons, let's say, just for the sake of easiness, I'm going to Tim Hortons 3 times a day and buying, a large coffee 3 times a day. And, at the end of the week, that's costing me, $30 in coffee. So maybe if I can cut that in half, spend $15 a week on coffee and make 2 coffees a day at home, then, you're winning, right? You're making that compromise, and that extra money is something that you can set aside to pay student loans. Or maybe if that's not your goal, maybe your goal is to invest. Maybe you don't even have student loans. And maybe your goal is to invest. Then there's an extra, $15 a week that you can be investing. And like the more aspects of your life that you assess like that, the more money you're going to have to reinvest and or to achieve those goals. And that's what this part is about. Is it something? Are you setting realistic goals for yourself? And how can you manipulate your financial situation to achieve those goals? And so we've hit specific, measurable, achievable, and realistic. And the last little component is time-based. And that's the one that people forget about. It's, when do you want to arrive at your destination? So it's fine to say, okay, I know where I am. I know where point A is. I know where I want to go. I know where point B is. I know all the steps that I need to take to get there. But then they forget that, there's a time frame in which they want to get there. So, maybe, I'm going to use Canada for an example, because that's where I live and that's where I'm from. Maybe to drive from, I'm going to use a really at-home example here, from London to Toronto, maybe it takes 2 hours. I know I'm starting in London. I know I want to be in Toronto. I know, my GPS is laid out exactly how I want to get there, the steps I need to take. But, if I just say, well, I'm just going to take my time, I'm going to drive, 40 kilometers an hour to get there, it's not going to take me 2 hours. It's going to take me, 5, 6, 7 hours to get there, which, I mean, in a lot of situations, there's no rush. It's not a race, but if you want to be, achieving, all of the goals that you have set out for yourself, the short term, sort of the midterm goals and the long-term goals, you got to give yourself some expectation of what's an appropriate amount of time to achieve those in. And so, in the example of, I want to pay off my student debt, that's, you give yourself a time frame of 5 years. Or, say your goal is, I want, like, you really just want to invest more money. So say your goal was, I want to invest, $1,000 every year. So that gives you, those components. It's specific, it's measurable, because you've got that $1,000 in there. If it's achievable, that's sort of up to your financial situation. Same with realistic. But it's time-based, because you're setting that yearly component in there, and you're giving yourself, if this is not done at the end of the year, then all hell's going to break loose, right? But joking aside, that's an important component as well. And once you have all of these under wraps, you can set some really, solid financial goals for yourself that can get you on that pathway to getting where you need to be. And you can set goals about, maybe if you're in high school right now and you haven't yet gone to university, so you start setting these goals now for how you're going to save for university. Maybe your goal is, I want to set aside $500 within the next, 3 months to be able to, finance, my first year of university. Or, maybe you're in university and you're starting to think about the fact that you're going to have student loans when you're finished. And you say, well, I'm going to start holding money back now and saving some money so that I can make those first initial payments, to sort of bring that down as much as possible. And so maybe that looks like, I'm going to save $500, every 2 months so that I can pay off my student loans. And maybe that's what that looks like. But, we can keep going on and on about, what kind of goals you set for yourself, but it ultimately depends on what your priority is, and sort of where you want to end up. And, those things are different for every single one of us. And it totally depends on your situation, whether you're a student, whether you're a high school student going into university, whether you're a university student getting ready to graduate. Maybe you're a parent of a student trying to figure out, how much you need to save in order to fund your child's education, or how you can help your child out. Maybe you have nothing to do with school at all, and you're just, you're trying to save for a car, you're trying to save for a vacation, or, down payment on a house, because that's a big one right now. It's super expensive. And, it's a hard thing to do. And I know that's one that's going to be coming for me in a few years is, how can I save money now so that I have that money accessible for the down payment when I need it? And those are all things that these goals, those are the steps, right? You have where you are now, you have your end goal of paying for the down payment, but how are you going to get there? And those are the SMART goals, right? Those are following those goals along the way to get to where you want to end up. But it is time for our last break of the show. When we come back, we'll kind of go over what we've been talking about so far, and I'll give you a quick little summary of how you can nail these financial goals, and you can program your GPS, and you can get started today. But let's head into our break. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan. You're listening to Financially Speaking on the Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back.
Too many of us get caught up in the unreal lives of reality television and complete to acquire stuff, which is setting us up to accumulate lots of debt. We're scared, confused, and don't know who to talk to. By tuning into Financially Speaking radio show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook Noble, you'll learn tips you can use to improve your financial health, which in turn can improve your overall health and make for a very happy life. Live a life you can afford and enjoy. It is possible. Listen for Financially Speaking radio show every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is the Financially Speaking Show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook Noble. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email by sending to Kathy@bookkeepplus.ca. Now back to the program.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan. You're listening to Financially Speaking on the Inspired Choices Network. Before we took off onto our break, we were talking about SMART goals, more specifically SMART financial goals. How to identify what your goals are, how to set goals that follow this, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-based criteria, and how those goals are the steps to the destination where you want to go. And what we've been talking about this whole episode is programming your GPS. And obviously I don't mean literally programming a computer in your car. I mean, programming your financial GPS, and how it is that you expect to get from point A to point B in the most efficient, and timely way possible. And what that, just to kind of go over what we've talked about so far is, you can't get to point B unless you know where you're coming from. And I mean, I'm sure you could if you spent, hundreds of years trying, but, we want to get there efficiently. We want to get there, as quick as possible. So, knowing where you are comes from setting those budgets and figuring out what your financial situation is. And it's something that takes time. It's going to take you maybe a few months, maybe a couple of years to figure out sort of, where you are financially. And once you've figured out that point A, so where it is that you stand right now as, high school student, as a university student, as maybe the parent of a university student or high school student, as a new graduate, as someone who's just entered the workforce. Maybe you've been in the workforce for a few years, maybe you're retired. Whatever the case is, figuring out what your financial situation is right now is your point A. And then, you got to figure out what your point B is, where you want to end up. And I mean, we all have a ton of destinations in mind. It's about figuring out, kind of ranking, which one is the most important. So identifying, what's important to you in the short term, what's important to you maybe in like the midterm, and what's important to you in the long term. And once you figure that out is, okay, this is my short-term goal. Let's say, for example, it's down payment on a house. So that's maybe the goal that you're going to work on first is how to achieve that, in a timely and efficient manner. So once you have your point A, so you know where you are, you know where you want to end up, what are the steps in between? Because that's the hard part, right, is the journey. And that's where, financial goals come into play, is if, right now you have $0 saved for a down payment and you know that you're going to need, $50,000 for a down payment, let's say, it's great to identify that, and it's great to just wish it into the world. Fingers crossed, all the power to you, but you got to come up with some form of plan for how that's going to happen. And that's where these financial goals come into play. And that's why they're so incredibly important. We talked about how they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. Because without that, they're hard to achieve and they're hard to monitor. Like we said, you can set very vague goals for yourself. You can set goals that aren't measurable, that you really have no way of, sort of not living up to them. Like if you're saying, oh, I want to save money. Well, saving $1, technically you kind of fall into that. You can kind of consider yourself successful on that, but that's not really going to help you in the long run. And, making sure you cap it with, what's going to be the amount of time that I want to achieve these goals. Because, once you have your point A, so you know where you are, you have your point B, you know where you want to go, you have all the steps to get there. You just have to follow them. If we're not doing it in a timely manner, we're not doing it, in the fashion that we're supposed to, it's not going to be as efficient. It's not going to be as relevant. And, ultimately we're not going to get where we need to go as quick as we would like to, or as efficiently as we would like to. And so, that's the main gist of programming your GPS is, one, figuring out what matters to you, right? So ask yourself, everyone who's listening right now, ask yourself, what matters to me and what is my priority in this exact moment? It's going to be different for all of us. Totally fine. There's nothing, wrong with that. It's where we are in our life. Maybe we're a student, maybe we're a parent of a student, maybe we're retired. Doesn't matter. Figure out what matters to you right now and what your priority is for you right now. Then figure out, what's within reach, what's attainable, what's realistic. Will it take a bit of time? Will it be a short-term goal? Will it be a midterm? Will it be a long-term? That's up to you. That's up to your situation. That's what's up. That's where you got to figure out where you are right now is budgeting, figuring out where you are in the present, so that what's in reach for you within the next 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, and you can sort that out yourself. And then, we talked about the importance of budgeting, and that's your number one, right? That's your number one, fallback is having that budget and knowing where you stand. Get a strong hold on your financial situation and what's coming in and what's going out, and make those changes that you need to, because that's going to help you in the long run. And then monitor your progress, right? You can't expect yourself to make a budget, have all of your your income and your expenses for the month, and just expect it to be perfect right away. You're going to have to monitor that. But that's what comes with programming your GPS, right? That's what this entire episode has been about, is figuring out where you are, where you want to be, and what the steps are in between. And if you follow, the goals that the steps I set out for you, it should be, a smooth transition on your journey to, financial success. And I'll leave you with that for tonight. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan. And you've been listening to Financially Speaking, the Inspired Choices Network.
Thank you for choosing to listen to Financially Speaking Radio Show. Kathy Cook Noble will return next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by making the choices that bring you all that you desire.